And the moment you're fighting it, you're suffering. Not because you're weak, because you're human. Because you were taught that control equals safety, that pushing equals progress. But there's another way. Hello, friend. I'm so glad you found this. If it feels right, share where you're listening from below, morning, midnight, doesn't matter. I love knowing we're scattered across time zones, all seeking the same truth. Get comfortable. Grab that blanket. Close your eyes if you want. You don't need to fix anything right now. Just breathe. For the next 3 hours, we're walking a path together. I'm going to share why everything you've forced that didn't work, the relationships, the plans, the doors that stayed closed, might not have been failures. They might have been conditions not yet ripe. Life's wisdom protecting you from what wasn't aligned. We'll explore the invisible rhythm of life, why impermanence is liberation, and how your greatest losses became your deepest teachers. But first, let's talk about why you're so tired. That exhaustion is speaking. Listen. That exhaustion you're carrying, it has a name in Buddhist teaching. It's called suffering born of resistance. You've been pushing against something that was never meant to be pushed. The natural timing of your life, the rhythm that's been here long before you tried to control it. And your body knows. It knows in the tightness of your shoulders at night, in the shallow breathing you don't even notice anymore, in the way your jaw clenches when someone asks how you're doing, in that heaviness in your chest that's been there so long you've started to think it's just part of who you are. But it's not. It's your body whispering what your mind refuses to hear. You're fighting a current that was never your enemy. There's an old teaching about the Chinese bamboo tree. Maybe you've heard versions of it, but let me share it the way it was taught to me. When you plant bamboo seeds, something interesting happens. Nothing. You water the ground. You tend the soil. You wait. And for an entire year, nothing visible emerges. The second year, still nothing. Third year, fourth year, 5 years of watering what looks like empty earth. Most people would have given up by then. Most people would say the seeds were dead, that their effort was wasted, that they should have tried something else. But in the 5th year, something extraordinary happens. The bamboo breaks through the soil and grows 90 feet in just 6 weeks. Now, here's what the Buddhist masters want you to understand. The bamboo wasn't doing nothing for those 5 years. It was developing a root system, a massive, intricate network underground, strong enough to support that 90-foot growth. Without those 5 years of invisible preparation, the rapid growth would be impossible. The bamboo would collapse under its own height. This is how life works. This is what the teaching of anicca, impermanence, is trying to show you. everything has its season. Everything has conditions that must ripen before manifestation can occur. And your desperate attempts to speed up that process, they're not helping. They're exhausting you. You look at your life and see empty soil. You wonder why nothing is growing, why everyone else seems to be blooming while you're still waiting, why your efforts haven't produced visible results yet. But what if, right now, in this very moment, your roots are deepening? What if everything you've been through, every delay, every closed door, every moment that felt like failure, was actually the soil teaching your roots how to hold strong? The problem isn't that you're late. The problem is that you've been measuring your growth by everyone else's timeline instead of the one that's actually unfolding in your life. Let's talk about what forcing actually does to you. When you force, you're operating from a place the Buddha called tanha, craving. Not the healthy kind of wanting that moves you forward with ease, but the desperate grasping that says, if this doesn't happen now, I am not enough. That's not striving. That's suffering. There's a crucial difference between the two, and this is where the teaching of right effort comes in. Right effort doesn't mean trying harder. It means trying wisely. It means understanding when to act and when to allow, when to plant seeds and when to trust the underground work that you cannot see. Think about how you've been living, the constant mental planning, the strategies and backup strategies, the tight control over every detail, because if you let go for even a moment, something might fall apart. But here's what's actually falling apart. You. Your nervous system wasn't designed to operate in constant override mode. When you push past your body's signals, when you ignore the exhaustion and keep grinding, when you treat rest as laziness and patience as weakness, you're not winning. You're fragmenting. The body becomes tense. Sleep becomes difficult. Joy becomes rare. And that voice inside that used to guide you, it gets quieter and quieter until you can't hear it anymore. This is what forcing does. It disconnects you from your own inner wisdom. The Buddha taught something profound that speaks directly to this moment. Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. But we've misunderstood this teaching. We think it means we shouldn't plan or hope. That's not it at all. What the Buddha was pointing to is this: your suffering isn't happening in the present moment. It's happening in your mind's story about the present moment. Right now, in this exact second, are you actually suffering? Or are you suffering because you're thinking about how things should be different, how you should be further along, how this should have happened already? The present moment, just this breath, just this heartbeat, is usually bearable. Sometimes it's even beautiful. It's when your mind jumps to, but what about tomorrow? Or, why didn't it happen yesterday? That the suffering floods in. And that's where the false urgency lives. Your mind, brilliant and protective as it is, operates with ancient wiring. It's designed to keep you safe, to scan for threats, to prepare for danger. This was useful when survival meant outrunning predators. But now, that same mechanism creates urgency where none exists. It tells you that if you don't achieve this goal by 30, you've failed. If you don't find love by a certain age, you'll be alone forever. If you don't succeed according to someone else's timeline, you're behind. None of this is true. But it feels true because your nervous system is in survival mode, treating your natural life unfolding as if it were a threat to your existence. And so, you push, you force, you exhaust yourself, trying to outrun a timeline that was never real to begin with. Let me tell you about seeds. Have you ever seen a seed panic? Have you ever watched a seed in the ground, desperate and anxious, trying to bloom before it's ready? No, because seeds are wise in a way we've forgotten how to be. A seed doesn't rush. It doesn't compare itself to the flower next to it. It doesn't worry that it's taking too long or that it should be further along by now. It simply responds to conditions. When there's enough water, enough warmth, enough darkness to feel safe, enough light to reach toward, then, and only then, does it begin to open. Not a moment sooner. Not because it's lazy, not because it's afraid, but because premature blooming would mean death. The seed knows something essential. Timing isn't arbitrary. It's intelligent. When you bloom before your roots are deep, you cannot sustain the growth. When you force the opening before conditions are right, you damage the very thing you're trying to create. This is anicca, in action, the teaching of impermanence. Everything arises according to causes and conditions. Everything has its moment of ripening. And your job isn't to make it happen faster. Your job is to tend the conditions and trust the process. But we don't trust it, do we? We've been taught that trust is naive, that patience is passive, that if we're not constantly doing, pushing, forcing, we're falling behind. So we override our own timing. We ignore the signs that say, not yet. We push through exhaustion as if it were just an obstacle instead of information. And here's what I want you to notice right now, in this moment. How tired are you? Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the deep tiredness that lives in your bones, the exhaustion that makes you wonder if you'll ever feel light again. That exhaustion, it's information. It's your body saying, this pace is not sustainable. This force is not natural. This timeline you're trying to meet is breaking you. And the most compassionate thing you can do, the most revolutionary thing you can do in a world that tells you to hustle harder, is to listen. To stop. To breathe. To acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, your life is unfolding exactly as it needs to, even if it doesn't match the picture you had in your mind. The Buddhist teaching of the middle way is relevant here. It's the path between two extremes, between forcing and giving up, between striving and collapsing, between controlling and abandoning. The middle way says, engage with your life, yes. Plant your seeds, yes. Water your garden, yes. But then, and this is the part we forget, step back and let conditions ripen. You cannot force a flower to bloom by pulling on its petals. You cannot make bamboo grow faster by yelling at the soil. You cannot rush your life into happening before its time without damaging the very thing you're trying to create. So, what do you do instead? You learn to distinguish between productive action and desperate forcing. You learn to feel the difference in your body. One feels like flow, even when it's challenging. The other feels like friction, like swimming against a current that never ends. You learn to recognize when your efforts are coming from trust and when they're coming from fear. Because actions born from trust move forward with a certain ease, even through difficulty. But actions born from fear feel heavy, desperate, exhausting. And you learn, slowly, gently, with great patience toward yourself, to trust that your life has its own intelligence, that there's a rhythm beneath everything, guiding, unfolding, ripening. Not because some external force is controlling your destiny, but because everything arises from conditions, and conditions take time to align. Your roots are growing right now, even if you can't see them. Your seeds are preparing to bloom, even if the soil still looks empty. And your timeline, your real timeline, not the one society handed you, is unfolding with perfect precision. You are not late. You are not behind. You are exactly where the conditions of your life have brought you. And from here, with patience, with presence, with trust in the natural rhythm of things, everything you've been forcing can finally begin to flow. But here's what nobody tells you about waiting. There's a sacred difference between patience and passivity. And understanding this changes everything. Stay with me. There's a feeling you know intimately, even if you've never named it. It's that sense that something should be happening right now, that you're supposed to be somewhere other than where you are. That time is running out and you're standing still while everyone else is moving forward. It's not quite anxiety, though it lives in the same neighborhood. It's not quite fear, though it tastes similar. It's restlessness, a low hum of urgency that never quite turns off. The Buddha had a word for this. He called it dukkha, often translated as suffering, but more accurately understood as a deep unsatisfactoriness, a persistent sense that something is not quite right. And here's what the teaching wants you to understand. This restlessness you feel, it's not a personal failing. It's not evidence that something is wrong with you. It's actually the mind doing exactly what an unobserved mind does. It creates urgency where none exists. Your mind is brilliant at this. It takes the natural unfolding of your life and turns it into a crisis. It takes a moment of stillness and fills it with 1,000 questions about whether you should be doing something else, being somewhere else, achieving something more. But what if you're not actually late? What if this feeling of being behind, this constant sense that life is happening somewhere else and you're missing it, what if that's just the mind's misunderstanding of how life actually works? See, the mind doesn't know how to wait. It wasn't designed for patience. It was designed to solve problems, to anticipate threats, to keep you safe by always scanning for what's next. And in a world where survival meant constant vigilance, this was useful. But now that same mechanism takes the natural pauses in your life, the periods of preparation, the seasons of rest, the necessary stillness before growth, and labels them as danger. Your mind whispers, if nothing is happening, something must be wrong. But that's not truth. That's just an ancient alarm system that doesn't know the difference between actual danger and the peaceful groundwork that precedes every meaningful change. There's a story about a young monk who came to the Buddha with this exact restlessness. The monk bowed deeply and asked, "Teacher, when will I be enlightened?" He expected wisdom, perhaps a teaching, maybe a timeline. Instead, the Buddha simply pointed to a tree nearby. The monk looked at the tree, confused. It was just a tree, leaves moving gently in the wind, roots deep in the earth, branches reaching toward the sky. "I don't understand," the monk said. The Buddha smiled. "Does the tree ask when it will be complete?" The monk stood there, the question hanging in the air between them. "The tree grows according to conditions," the Buddha continued. "Rain comes, the tree drinks. Sun shines, the tree reaches. Winter arrives, the tree rests. It does not ask if it is ready. It does not wonder if it is behind schedule. It simply responds to what is present, moment by moment." Your enlightenment is the same. It unfolds according to conditions. Your practice, your understanding, your readiness. Asking when is like asking the tree to bloom before spring arrives. The question itself reveals the obstacle. This is what restlessness really is. It's the gap between what your mind expects and what reality is offering right now. It's the space between "I should be here" and "I am here." And that gap, that space of misalignment, creates the suffering of urgency. The Buddhist teachings identify restlessness as one of the 5 hindrances, one of the mental states that obscures clear seeing, not because restlessness is bad, but because it prevents you from being present with what actually is. When your mind is racing ahead, when you're constantly checking whether you're on track, whether you're enough, whether you're where you should be, you cannot possibly see clearly what this moment is offering. You're too busy arguing with reality to actually experience it. And here's the paradox. The thing you're rushing toward, you'll never arrive if you can't be present for the steps that take you there. Think about the last time you felt truly at peace. I'm willing to bet it wasn't because everything in your life was perfect. It wasn't because you had finally achieved every goal or checked every box. It was probably a moment when you stopped checking, when you stopped measuring, when you were simply here, breathing, present, not needing anything to be different than it was. That's the wisdom living inside not yet. Not yet doesn't mean never. It means the conditions haven't fully ripened. It means there's still groundwork happening beneath the surface. It means your roots are still deepening in ways you cannot see. But the restless mind hears not yet and translates it as rejection, as evidence of unworthiness, as proof that you're failing. And so the anxiety grows. Let me tell you what I've learned about the difference between anxiety and intuition, because this is where so many of us get confused. Anxiety lives in the future. It spins stories about all the terrible things that might happen, all the ways you might fail, all the opportunities you might miss. It's loud, urgent, insistent. It demands immediate action, even when there's nothing useful to do right now. Anxiety feels like drowning in questions that have no answers yet. Intuition, on the other hand, lives in the present. It's quiet, calm, clear. It doesn't scream at you to do something. It gently suggests a direction. It doesn't create panic. It creates a sense of knowing, even when you can't explain why. Intuition feels like coming home to something true. When you're anxious, your body contracts, shoulders tight, breath shallow, chest constricted. When you're following intuition, your body opens. Even if the path ahead is uncertain, there's a quality of rightness that the body recognizes. The restless mind, caught in anxiety, cannot hear intuition. It's too noisy, too desperate, too convinced that something terrible will happen if you don't figure everything out right now. But here's what the Buddha taught, and it's as relevant today as it was 2,500 years ago. Nothing can harm you as much as your own thoughts unguarded. Not the circumstances of your life, not the timing of your goals, not the judgment of others. Your own unexamined thoughts, running wild, creating urgency, spinning catastrophe, measuring and comparing and finding you lacking. Those are what create the deepest suffering. And the antidote isn't to force the thoughts to stop. It's to become aware of them, to watch them without believing every story they tell. There was a time in my own life when the restlessness was so consuming I could barely breathe through it. Every morning I would wake up with a tight knot in my chest, this immediate sense that I was behind, that I had already wasted time by sleeping, that everyone else was moving forward while I was stuck. I remember one particular morning, sitting on the edge of my bed, feeling that familiar panic rising, and instead of doing what I usually did, jumping up, making lists, trying to outrun the feeling, I just sat there. I placed my hand on my chest and felt my heart racing. I noticed how shallow my breath had become. I observed the thoughts racing through my mind. You should have done this by now. Everyone else is further ahead. You're running out of time. What's wrong with you? And then I asked myself a simple question. Is any of that true in this exact moment? In that moment, I was sitting on a bed. The morning light was coming through the window. I was breathing. I was alive. Nothing terrible was actually happening. The suffering was entirely in my mind's story about what should be happening instead. That's when I started learning about awareness of mental states, not as a concept, but as a practice. The Buddhist teaching of mindfulness isn't about clearing your mind or stopping your thoughts. It's about becoming aware of what your mind is doing, so you can choose whether to believe it. You start to notice, there's the story about being behind. There's the comparison to others. There's the urgency that has no basis in present reality. And in that noticing, something shifts. The thoughts don't necessarily stop, but they lose their grip on you. You can see them as what they are, mental phenomena, not absolute truth. This is what it means to observe without judging, not to condemn yourself for having restless thoughts, but to simply see them clearly. This is what the mind does when it feels uncertain. This is the pattern it runs when it's afraid. And then, and this is the crucial part, you bring yourself back to your breath. Not as a technique to fix anything, but as a way of returning to what's real. Your breath is always happening now, not in the future you're worried about, not in the past you're regretting. Right here, right now. One breath in, one breath out. And in that simple return, you're practicing the art of being present, even when your mind wants to be anywhere else. This doesn't mean the restlessness disappears forever. It means you start to recognize it when it arrives. And you know you don't have to believe everything it tells you. You learn that your worth is not measured by your timeline. You learn that your value is not determined by how much you've achieved by a certain age, or whether you're keeping pace with people who are on completely different paths with completely different conditions. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are exactly where decades of causes and conditions have brought you. And from here, with awareness and patience, you can move forward with clarity instead of panic. The restlessness wants you to believe that if you just push harder, achieve faster, become more, then you'll finally be allowed to rest. But that's backwards. Rest isn't the reward for completing everything. Rest is the foundation that allows you to see clearly what actually needs to be done. When you pause, truly pause, not just in body, but in mind, you create space for wisdom to arise, for intuition to speak, for the truth beneath the urgency to reveal itself. And often, what reveals itself is this: the urgency was never real. There is no cosmic deadline you're racing toward. There is no ultimate judge tallying up whether you hit arbitrary milestones on time. There is only this moment, and what you choose to do with your awareness right now. Will you let the restless mind convince you that you're always behind? Or will you bring gentle awareness to that pattern and choose, even for just this one breath, to be here instead? The mind won't stop creating urgency overnight. This is lifelong practice. But each time you notice the restlessness and choose not to believe it, you're training yourself in a different way of being. A way that's grounded in presence instead of panic. A way that trusts the unfolding instead of trying to force it. And slowly, over time, the restlessness begins to quiet. Not because everything in your life is suddenly perfect, but because you've stopped requiring it to be. You've learned to sit with "not yet" without making it mean you're not enough. You've learned to feel the urgency without letting it dictate your actions. You've learned that your mind will always have opinions about where you should be, but you don't have to live according to those opinions. You can live according to what's true instead. Now, I want to share something that might feel counterintuitive at first. It's about why letting go actually creates more space than holding on. And there's ancient wisdom, thousands of years old, that proves this. Everything you've ever loved will change. Everyone you know will leave, one way or another, through death, distance, or the simple evolution of who people become over time. Every possession you own will break, decay, or pass into someone else's hands. Every version of yourself that you've been is already gone, replaced by who you are now, who will be replaced by who you become next. This isn't pessimism. This is the first and most fundamental truth the Buddha taught. Anicca, impermanence. All conditioned things, everything that arises from causes and conditions, are in constant flux. Nothing stays. Nothing remains fixed. Change is not the exception to the rule of existence. Change is the rule. And here's where it gets interesting. Your suffering doesn't come from change itself. It comes from your resistance to change, from your desperate attempt to make permanent what was always, by its very nature, temporary. This is dukkha, the second mark of existence. Suffering arises from clinging to what must change. You cling to relationships, hoping they'll stay exactly as they are. You cling to youth, to health, to circumstances that feel good. You cling to ideas about how your life should unfold, to timelines you've created, to versions of yourself you think you should be. And every time reality reminds you that nothing stays, you experience that as loss, as failure, as something going wrong. But what if nothing is going wrong? What if change is exactly what's supposed to happen, and your suffering comes not from the change, but from your belief that it shouldn't be changing? There's a teaching story about a wise teacher who had a clay cup he loved dearly. He drank his tea from it every morning. He admired its simple beauty, the way it fit perfectly in his hands, the smooth glaze that caught the light just so. One day, a student noticed how carefully the teacher handled this cup and asked, "Teacher, you clearly love this cup. What will you do when it breaks?" The teacher smiled and said something that changed the student's understanding forever. "It's already broken," he said. "I'm just enjoying it now." The student was confused. "But teacher, the cup is whole. It's not broken." "It will break," the teacher said gently. "All things do. Clay returns to earth. This cup, this body, this life, all of it is temporary. So rather than pretend it will last forever and then suffer when it breaks, I acknowledge its nature now. It's already broken. It's already returning to what it came from. And because I see this clearly, I can truly appreciate it while it's here. No clinging, no denial, just presence with what is for as long as it lasts." This is the wisdom of impermanence. When you understand that everything is already in the process of changing, already moving toward its next form, you stop trying to freeze it in place. You stop exhausting yourself, trying to make permanent what was never meant to be permanent. And something unexpected happens. You become free to actually enjoy what's here. Because you're not spending your energy trying to control the uncontrollable. You're not lost in anxiety about losing what you have. You're simply here, present, aware that this moment is precious, precisely because it won't last. Now, I know what some part of you might be thinking. This sounds hopeless. If nothing lasts, what's the point? But that's not what this teaching is pointing to at all. This isn't nihilism. This is liberation. When you deeply understand impermanence, you stop relating to life as something you possess. You start relating to it as something you participate in. Nothing truly belongs to you, not your body. It's changing every moment. Cells dying and being born, aging according to conditions you don't control. Not your relationships. People grow, evolve, sometimes grow apart. Not your thoughts or emotions. They arise and pass like weather systems moving through. You are not the owner of any of this. You are the temporary caretaker. And when you stop trying to own what cannot be owned, the burden lifts. This is anatta, the third mark of existence, non-self, the teaching that there is no fixed, permanent, unchanging self at the core of your being. You are not a solid, static thing. You are a process, a constantly changing flow of experiences, conditions, causes, and effects arising and passing away. And once you see this clearly, not just intellectually, but in your direct experience, something fundamental shifts. You stop trying to hold water in your fists. Have you ever tried it? Scooping water from a river or a pool and trying to keep it in your closed hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it leaks out between your fingers. The more desperate you are to hold on, the more certainly you lose what you're trying to keep. But if you relax your hands, if you let them rest open in the water stays as long as it stays. And when it flows away, it flows. No suffering, no loss, just the natural movement of things. This is what letting go looks like. Not abandoning everything you care about, not becoming cold or detached, but learning to hold your life with open hands instead of clenched fists. The Buddha taught something else that's crucial to understanding this: dependent origination. It's one of the most profound teachings in Buddhism, and it completely shifts how you see your life. Everything that exists arises from causes and conditions. Nothing happens in isolation. Nothing is independent. This moment you're in right now, it didn't happen to you by some cosmic design or universal will. It arose from countless conditions meeting in this exact way. Your past actions, yes, but also your parents' choices, their parents' choices, historical events, cultural conditioning, random chance, other people's decisions, environmental factors, biological processes, and on, an infinite web of interconnected causes. You are not separate from this web. You are one strand in it, affecting and being affected by everything else. And this means that what happens in your life isn't personal judgment or cosmic reward or punishment. It's simply conditions ripening. When you understand this, you stop taking everything so personally. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" as if you were singled out. Instead, you start asking, "What conditions led to this?" And "What can I learn from this?" And "How do I respond with wisdom?" This shift from victim to participant changes everything. Because if your life is arising from conditions, then you have agency in shaping those conditions going forward. Not total control, that's the illusion that creates suffering, but influence, choice, the ability to plant seeds that will grow into different outcomes. But you cannot control when those seeds will sprout. You cannot force the conditions to ripen faster. You can only do your part and then let go, trusting that the natural process of cause and effect will unfold as it unfolds. This is where the teaching of Upadana becomes important. Upadana means clinging or grasping. It's the tight fist around the water, the desperate need to control outcomes, the refusal to accept that things change. And the Buddha was very clear. Upadana is the root of suffering. Not wanting things. Wanting is natural, but clinging to things, demanding they stay exactly as they are, refusing to accept their impermanent nature, that's where the pain lives. When you cling to a relationship, you suffocate it. When you cling to youth, you miss the wisdom of aging. When you cling to one version of yourself, you prevent growth. When you cling to how things should be, you cannot respond skillfully to how things actually are. Letting go, then, is not a loss. It's an alignment with reality. It's saying, I understand that this will change. I understand that I cannot freeze this moment forever. So I will be fully present with it now, loving it now, appreciating it now, without demanding that it stay. And here's the paradox. When you stop clinging, you actually experience things more deeply. Because you're not distant and defended, already grieving the loss before the thing is even gone. You're here, open, available, letting life touch you fully, because you've made peace with its temporary nature. Your breath is teaching you this in every moment, if you pay attention. Breathe in. The inhale arrives. It fills your lungs. And then, without you having to force it, without you having to grieve it, it ends. The exhale begins. It leaves your body, and then it too ends, making space for the next inhale. You don't cling to the inhale and refuse to let it go. You don't panic when the exhale leaves, wondering if another breath will come. You trust the natural rhythm of arising and passing, over and over, sustaining your life precisely because you don't try to control it. This is how all of life works. Inhale, exhale, arrive, depart, begin, end, birth, death. Not tragedy, just truth. And when you align yourself with this truth instead of fighting it, something releases in you. The tension eases, the panic subsides, the constant low-grade anxiety about losing what you have begins to dissolve. Because you're no longer trying to do the impossible. You're no longer trying to make permanent what is, by nature, impermanent. You're simply here, breathing, present, with what is, for as long as it lasts. The Buddha said, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. Not turns away from life, turns away from suffering. because suffering comes from the misunderstanding that things should stay when their nature is to change. And wisdom comes from seeing clearly. This will change, and that's not a problem to be solved. That's just how it is. When you see this, really see it, not just think about it, you stop relating to change as the enemy. You stop seeing every ending as a personal failure. You stop treating loss as evidence that something went wrong. Instead, you begin to see change as the very fabric of existence. Loss as the inevitable counterpart to having. Endings as the necessary completion that makes space for new beginnings. And here's the gentle truth that might bring you some peace right now. Impermanence means your pain won't last either. Whatever you're struggling with, whatever weight you're carrying, whatever suffering feels permanent in this moment, it too is subject to change. It too will shift, evolve, transform, and eventually pass. Nothing stays. Not the good, not the bad, not the neutral. Everything is moving, always, toward its next form. So when you find yourself clinging, and you will, because you're human, and clinging is what the untrained mind does, can you notice it? Can you feel the tightness in your chest, the grasping in your thoughts, the refusal to accept what's changing? And then, with great gentleness toward yourself, can you soften? Can you take one breath and remind yourself, this too is changing. This too will pass. I don't have to hold so tightly. Not because you don't care, but because you understand that holding tightly doesn't stop the change. It only exhausts you. Letting go is not giving up. It's not indifference. It's not coldness. It's wisdom. It's alignment with how things actually are. It's the relief that comes when you stop fighting a battle you could never win, the battle against change itself. And when you release that futile fight, you discover something beautiful. You have so much more energy for what actually matters. For being present, for loving without strangling, for appreciating without possessing, for participating fully in this temporary, precious, ever-changing dance of existence. The clay cup is already broken. Your life is already changing. Everything you love is already in motion toward its next form. This isn't cause for despair.